It's a beautiful day here in Florida. Finally, we've had a little bit cooler weather, so it's been an enjoyable day, a nerve-wracking day as we look to see what's going to happen with the election results coming up. And actually, it's 7 o'clock, so results are going to start to post pretty soon here. So I don't think there's going to be many people watching because there are so many people who are invested in this election one way or another. So I'm not going to get political tonight. It's it's more about trying to find a way because I know a lot of people are anxious out there. So I thought what I would do today actually is try to maybe give you a few stories, stories I haven't told before. And I've got a couple of them that actually have presidential relationships to them. So of readings that I've done in the past. So a little housekeeping first of all for Matthew Delfino. If you continue to keep Matthew in your prayers as he continues to recuperate, that'd be fantastic. And also for my cousin Keith Painley. I did miss a show or two. I remember, I think at one, I can't remember now, due to my cousin's funeral, who he was tragically killed in a car accident about almost 2 weeks ago now. So if you could keep him and his family in your prayers, I'd appreciate it very, very much. As we move on, I had an interesting haunting this week, which was interesting from a couple of aspects. I really, really dislike it when spirit bothers children in particular, and children that aren't able to fend for themselves. When you have a 2 or 3 year old that has a limited vocabulary because of their age, and they are afraid and frightened, and they can't express what that feeling is like. It's tough. It's tough to work with that child as a client to find out what's actually happening and if they're actually seeing what I see, and how I can help them, because I don't want them to be frightened or scared, or and I'll do everything I can to protect the child, and I would do that with someone on this plane as I do with spirit. And it really, really bothers me when spirit attacks a child, and it doesn't have to be per se something very nasty that's attacking a child. It can be just something that the child doesn't understand and is scary to that child, because children of that age are used to having their parents around, or family or friends that they're familiar with, and are usually pretty shy around other people. And when they get a spirit that they're unfamiliar with, that spirit can look shiny, look new, look interesting, or something of this nature, and it's attractive to a child, and they may be curious about what they're seeing, and then it turns out to scare them. And this can be traumatizing and have a lifelong impact. I know for myself, when I would see things, I was very, very lucky. My first memories are at 4 with spirit, but there could have been things happening before that I just don't remember. But again, mine were good. Mine were protective. Mine were protective energies from Native Americans who were in the woods behind the house that I would go out and speak with. So in this case, I kind of want to set up the story as it's a young couple with a small child, and they sold their home and they moved into a rental property. And in this rental property, as they're getting settled in and start to get, unload their boxes, get their stuff taken care of in the house, there were some things that started to be problematic, because the young child almost immediately, she apparently had been sleeping fine on her own before the move. And all of a sudden, when they moved into this house, she started screaming about that there was a man in the room with her. I've told everybody before, I'm not that I'm skeptical of what I do, obviously, but I am skeptical about what people tell me, because your eyes can play tricks on you. I've been doing this for a very long time, over 50 years. I've seen a lot and done a lot, although I still get surprised every now and again with what I see. And so I do ask a lot of questions of clients that are going to hire me for a haunting, to see whether or not there's something kind of that may be based in reality, something, because anytime that you pick up a child and you move to a new location, there could be nightmares from a new place where the child feels insecure. There could be any number of things, different shadows, different things in a room, because it's new to the child. So I like to look at all of those things from an objective perspective before I really jump in and say, yes, it's spiritually related in some capacity. So I do want to let people know that if you do have small children and you do move into a place, I want you to listen to them. there are ways that you could tell. And one of the things that I will get to in a bit here when I go through the story is I did, after I went and cleared the house yesterday, I wanted to make sure that people understand that I still wanted a camera because you could put cameras in the room. And so I did want this child to be watched after I left, because if the child was getting up and still talking, and there's one thing for children to have play mates or something, but how you can tell when people are when children in particular are interacting with something or someone, because they have their attention, they're looking at a particular place into someone's eyes, they're looking at facial features, much like small animals too. Their brains like to get that information, and they can tell a lot by facial expressions. And so I did want to see what was going on with this child. So both before and after I left. So before I left, one of the things that before I went over to the house and did the clearing of this haunting, I wanted to see if I could kind of put myself in the room, as I usually do, to see how nasty or dangerous this was. And I didn't get a sense of nastiness in particular. I did get a sense that this entity was trying to cause problems, and it's just the intentions weren't good toward this child. I don't think that this entity would have been able to hurt the child. I don't get that sense. I didn't feel that sense before I went there, that was the case. But I did wind up going about 3 days after I got the initial phone call. And once I got there, one of the things that was very, very interesting about this haunting was that, because it was a rental property, one of the first things I sensed about the property was that it had not sold, that it was on the market for a long time. And typically, if a home is in a market for a long time, there's a reason for it. You get a sense. I mean, I think everybody that's watching the show or will ever watch the show out on the internet knows that when they go into a home, you feel comfortable, you don't feel comfortable. And you get that sense pretty quickly. It's kind of like when you meet someone. They say that within the first 2 or 3 seconds of meeting somebody, you can tell whether or not you trust that individual, or whether you like that individual, or you get a general perception of what they're like, or what their character may be like. And the same thing with homes. The same thing is this with any space. You're either comfortable in that location or not, and your tingly spider extra worldly senses will usually let you know that there's something to be cautious of. And anytime I see a house that's been on the market for a very long time, albeit, if there was a house in a neighborhood that somebody was asking, $750,000 for, and the house was worth $500,000, you can see why it's not selling, perhaps. But if it's priced the same way, what's the reason why a house isn't selling? And usually, when I go to these types of homes, I get the sense, and this is why I do a cleansing of those types of home, and not a clearing of spirit. So one of the things that I did sense when I walked in there is that there were a couple of things that had to be addressed in this home. And one of them I sensed in the first, it didn't have a lot of homeowner energy in it, because no one had lived in that space for a while. So it didn't get a lot of energy in that sense. But I walked into the child's room. It was very, very strange. The energy in there actually made me sick to my stomach. And that doesn't happen often. I was so nauseous that I thought I was going to throw up. And when that happens, that's not good. It's a strong spirit. There's something there that I need to deal with. There's something that my senses. And I'll tell you, that usually happens to me before I go to any haunting. Is the night before, I'll start to sense and feel what I'm going to be working with the next day, and I will start to maybe get sick to my stomach, or feel it gets kind of tied up in knots from that perspective, because your nervous system does seem to affect people's digestive tract in a big way most of the time. That's why when people have issues where they're nervous about something or something, people get sick to their stomach or want to throw up. It's that same sense, same reaction that the nervous system is going to take out on that digestive tract. And this is what happened to me here. So I started to get this fuzzy, weird feeling in my head, like it was bouncing back and forth in my brain, in my head. Something was a strange feeling that I had there, and this very, very, very nauseous feeling. And when I told the child's mother about this, she said that since they moved to the house, she felt that way every time she walked into this room. So she was getting the exact same feelings. It was confirmation for me that what I was sensing and feeling is exactly what what happened to her, what was happening to her. So it made her feel better. It made me feel better that we were both synced up in what we were sensing in this room for ourselves. And then so I continued to walk around the house. I walked into the garage area, and there was a problem in the garage. There was also a spirit there that needed to be transitioned. But this was something that was relatively benign. People would have just felt somebody looking down at them while they were doing laundry out there, because that's where the laundry was, and that's where some other things were in this home. So that's one of the things that people would have felt there. And when I mentioned that to her, she too felt that she was being watched in that space. It was an easy spirit to cross. The spirit actually was not there very long. And actually, this spirit was also hiding from the major problem that was in the house. But it found a comforting area because there was no activity in the house. Nobody was living there, and it just needed to cross. So this was actually kind of a young gentleman that was relatively benign and wanted to cross. So that was an easy crossing there. Did what I needed to do. But then protected myself, protected the family, walked back into the child's bedroom. The funny thing about it was I spent a lot of time trying to get to know the child, and spent a lot of time really, getting down on my knees, having a pseudo little tea party, trying to figure out how that I could gain her trust so that she would open up and talk to me about, and so that I could address the things with her that I felt I needed confirmation on that she was saying. So finally, after maybe about 40 minutes or so of interacting with the child, I brought her into her room with the mother, and I kind of walked to one end of the room and told her that I felt energy and started to see something on the floor. And so I went over there was a huge throw rug in the middle of this room. The room was a relatively large room, and it was a relatively large throw rug. It wasn't carpeting, it was a rug. And so I went over to kind of one section. It was about maybe 5 foot away from the I guess you call it not a playpen, but I don't have children, so I'm trying to think of all these things. The crib, I guess it would be. And so about 5 foot away from the crib, and you could see where this energy field was. And it was kind of like a white light where you could kind of see this, I wouldn't say it's a vortex, but you could see this area of energy that was moving about on the floor. And I asked the young child what, where she saw the bad man. And she said, and I'm pointing, is this where you see her? And she said, this is where this is the bad man, where he stands. I said, okay. And I got up and I started to walk back to get some of the articles that I use to do a cleansing, to do a removal of a spirit, a banishing of a spirit. And as I went to go get, the holy water and sage and salt and some other things that I needed, as I turned around and got off the carpeting, the young child got up and got off the carpet and pushed the carpeting off to one side. And she said, I'm afraid of the hole. It's the man in the hole. And this is where it got strange. It's the child's mother didn't tell the child that there was a hole in this floor. And it's strange for Florida because we don't have basements here. We're 7 foot, this house is 7 foot above sea level. So this is not a place to have basements. We would be underwater here. So there are no basements down here in South Florida, not that I've ever seen. And so it's just not built that way. And this house, however, had what would be, I guess you would consider it a crawl space almost, where there was a large plank that was about maybe 18 inches wide and about 4 foot long, that the plank would come off the floor, and you could pull that plank off and you could look down and it was all sand, like a giant sand dune underneath this house. I've never seen anything like it. I've lived in Florida for 20 years. I've never seen another house that has ever had anything like that. And the girl didn't know that it was there, but the mother did. And she said she has never done that, never moved this, but she was trying to help me. She was trying to help me. I get what the child was trying to do. And we had to get tools to actually get this plank off the ground. So when I looked down in there and felt down in there, you could feel that this spirit was associated with the land. It had absolutely nothing to do with the house. That's just one thing I would do want to caution people on, is sometimes people move into homes and it's not really associated with the house. You didn't bring it. It may not, it may have been there long before the house was even built. Could have been, when I go to, I've been places on old farms, and there have been old battles in some of these places. And then the farmer partitioned off some of the land. And so there maybe have been hundreds of soldiers that were killed on this plot of land in Tennessee or Georgia or other places that I've been, where you wouldn't have known, or, Native American warfare or something where it's just, you wouldn't know when you bought the plot of land that this history existed there. And then you build a house, and then all of a sudden you start to have problems. It really has nothing to do with you. It's maybe just associated with the land. So it could be land, it could be a portal of some sort that develops in an area or has always been there, or an ley line or something of this nature. And in this particular house, it was actually associated with the land. And I actually, not one of my favorite things to do, but I had to get down. It was about maybe a 2.5 foot, 3 foot section, and crawl down in there and do what I had to do to help heal the land. We have one of our colleagues here, whatever, on Enlightened World Network, Terry Angel, who is out doing land healing at the moment, trying to heal the earth. And she too is very good at making sure she knows how to do healing of land. And that's what actually had to happen here, was be able to move the spirit on, because the spirit was there before the house was ever built, had died near or on this land and was tied to it. So this whole haunting was really about getting rid of and healing the land that was there, so that this soul could finally move on, and moved on. It wasn't, I thought it was gonna be harder than it was. But once the land was healed, he was able to be free, basically. And once he was freed from why he was attached to the land, then we went ahead and closed it up and went and did a full house blessing and that sort of thing to make sure that this wouldn't come back. I had them also seal up the room. The little girl, I think, will have a little PTSD because she was getting attention from what she was seeing before. So I think that she may be calling out, saying that she's saying things, screaming, crying, maybe to get attention as she moves on. So that's why I want the camera, and then we'll talk about the camera. The camera brought back into the room there for about a week or so, just to see that she's sleeping well and that the activity has died down for her, and that is she crying perhaps in the future. I haven't heard back from the client yet today, but if the child hopefully is sleeping much better now, and that things have substantially calmed down at that location. So an interesting haunting, but I think it also lets people understand a little bit more that you don't really have hauntings that are always associated with homes, or sometimes it's attached and people bring them in, or could have been brought there by the last homeowner. But anybody who would have gone to buy this home and still not sold, again, they're renting this house, it's still not sold. So anybody who would go to buy this house would feel this energy there. And now the house is much more palatable to be able to sell, because it's the feeling in the house is much lighter, much airier. The land is better, and therefore the house, the situation in the house, they're going to have much less activity, because no one in the house really is gifted per se. So I don't think that they're going to really encounter much more spirit activity. So that's all good things, and it's another good healing and moving on spirits who need to get where they and continue on their spiritual journey. So it was great from that perspective, and it always makes me feel good when I'm able to go and help someone in that fashion. So that was what happened this week as far as a haunting. I want to talk about, I'm going to grab a sip of water here and talk about one I've never told anybody, actually. My brothers and sister know this in a roundabout sense, because I think I know what this was. But I don't like to speculate about things either. So I'm going to give what I know happened, and then the rest of it we're going to kind of keep on the back burner a little bit until I get a sign that this was that part of it was actually what I think that it was. I was probably maybe 13 years old, or 12, 11, somewhere in that general vicinity, and I grew up in a very, very, very rural area of Ohio, and there were farms all around the house, and a lot of wooded area, so that you could go explore the woods all day. So it's a great place as a child to go hang out, unless you're gifted. Then it was challenging sometimes, and this was one of those times because, again, as I always see, sense, and feel things, there comes a time, sometimes where, particularly at that age, where I couldn't control it. I didn't understand what I was seeing, or perhaps what I should do with what I was seeing, or how to help what I was seeing. And in this particular case, we had little creeks that ran into the Cuyahoga River, which was down at the bottom of the hill where we used to go. We could camp down there and go canoeing and kayaking, and then there was no kayaking at that time; it was mostly canoeing. And it went from where I lived in rural Ohio all the way into downtown Cleveland. It still does. But see, I was walking down toward the river, which was maybe about maybe 3/4 of a mile from where my parents lived. And I was just walking down through the woods. And as I was going through the woods, one of the people who lived close to that area, uh, I don't know if that was their property or not. I still have no idea. This could have been their property, but it was so far back in the woods. But there was a little creek back there, and they had a bridge. Somebody had built this kind of a redwood deck bridge over. It's a small bridge. It was probably maybe 10 feet, 12 foot long, and just an arch that went over this. And it was just a cute little bridge in the middle of nowhere, built in the woods. And so I was back there, and I'm just used to like to take leaves and float them down, or popsicle sticks and float them down, as this water ran toward the river, and was playing as a kid. And so I was back there, and I heard a snap. I was back there by myself, and I felt comfortable in the woods. Again, since I was 4 years old, I saw Native Americans in the woods. I always felt very protected in the woods. I never felt anything strange back there. And if I ever did, it was always the spirits that I was familiar with. And in this particular instance, I was not behind the woods of my house. I crossed the street and went down behind some other people's homes, where I was walking through the woods, and got to this when I was just sitting on this bridge, and I was playing, and heard this branch snap, and it caught my attention, and everything went quiet. And when you grow up in the woods, it's never quiet. The birds are usually always singing, they're chirping, they're doing whatever. You hear little rodents, squirrels and chipmunks and skunks and whatever running through the woods, and deer and everything else that we had in the woods. And it was never a quiet place. Crickets and everything, you'd hear there was sound. And when that snap happened, I remember to this day how quiet it became in the woods. And I hadn't experienced that to that point. It caught my attention, and still to this day, why did it get so quiet? It was very, very strange and very odd, almost otherworldly, from a standpoint that when your world is such, and then the sound is just taken away from you, it's disconcerting. And it was at that age, and I remember it distinctly. And as I sat there trying to figure out where the branch had broken, because it wasn't close, but it wasn't super far away either. And I'm looking around the woods, scanning the woods, and I didn't see anything. Nothing, absolutely nothing. There wasn't a bird, there wasn't a chipmunk, there wasn't anything running around the woods at all. But I got the spider senses, those tingly senses went up, and I just felt like I heard, get out. I needed to get out of where I was. So I started walking back out of the woods, and I was probably about a half mile deep into the woods by myself. And as I start walking back, I start to hear footsteps behind me. You can hear the crunch of leaves and the crunch of things behind me. And I stopped, and it stopped. And then I thought maybe, okay, so I walked a little bit further, and I heard it again, and I stopped. And I didn't know, and it stopped again, and I didn't know what to do, because then I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm trying to rationally think this out. Am I hearing the leaves under my own feet? What am I hearing? Why is this strange? Am I getting scared for no reason? You start asking yourself all those questions, and so I started to pick up the pace a little bit. And I started to move faster out of the woods as I was going up the hill, as I'm kind of getting through, and I'm getting through this kind of a thickly wooded area. And back. So I have to explain that when you cross the street, there was maybe an acre or so of kind of fresh, uh, kind of pasture land. And then on the other side of the pasture land, there was this row of trees. And on one side of the row of trees, there was pasture land. And then when you kind of went over to another side of it, it was all a wooded area. And I was back in that wooded area. As I could see myself getting closer to that open land area, and as I got maybe 100 yards from where that line was to where I could see that my house again, I got closer and closer, and it picked up steam, and I heard this rustling. There was no other sound, nothing other than this rustling and this. You could hear this whoosh, and just the sound in my head, the voices in my head were just saying, "Get out, get out, get out!" And now I'm running. I'm panicking now. And I start to run, and I get to, and at that line that divided the woods from the pasture land, was a kind of there was barbed wire there, 3 rows of barbed wire, but there was also 2 rows of electric fence there. As I jumped over to get over this and looked back, I could see things moving. I could see leaves being kicked up. I could see stuff, but nothing there. It was almost like the wind was picking up something, but it was only in this one place where this noise is coming from. And I'm running and I'm running and I'm panicked and I'm trying to run. And I got halfway across the open field and I stopped and I turned around and looked back and I saw this huge shadow. And the shadow just stood there. And you know how you can tell somebody's in profile. And if I turn sideways now, you can see that there's a nose and a chin and a forehead and ears and things, as you turn sideways, and as opposed to looking straight on. And the shadow was looking straight at me, just stood there in the wood line. And all I saw was the shadow. And it was a tall, tall figure. And it just sat there and it stared straight at me. And I didn't know what to do. I still wanted to run. I still wanted to just get out of there. And I was mesmerized because I wanted, your eyes, you're trying to focus on it, figure out what this is, why it's there. And then this figure slowly turned and started to walk slowly across the wood line. And you could see the profile and the legs and the arms as it moved forward, and it walked very slowly, very purposefully, never looked back at me, just walked and walked and walked, and finally just blended into the shadows of the woods. It was probably the thing right after that happened. I was terrified of going into the woods after that fact. It really did have a profound effect on me because I didn't feel safe any longer. And to this day, I think I told everybody the story when my husband Mark and I were up in I think Jamestown, Virginia, and we were at a cemetery there, and there were Confederate soldiers in the wood line and did the same thing that followed me through, and it was uncomfortable. We're trying to get away, and it was the same type of feeling. And since that, I've always been uncomfortable now in the woods. It's very challenging for me to go out and just go hiking where I know there aren't going to be other people, because I do sense these things and do see things and do see people out there. And sometimes it's not always good for me. And now I think I haven't done that in a long time. I may feel better about it now. I haven't just gone out walking in the woods by myself. I mean, usually with other people. I'm doing it in a group. But I think I would be still challenged at this point to go do that by myself because it is nerve-wracking when you are sensitive to spirit and you get out there. Even though I feel incredibly protected, there's a lot of stuff out there that I have encountered in my journey spiritually that I hopefully don't want to encounter by myself in the woods. But that was one of those pivotal areas of my life where I was really petrified. And I picture it to this day. I can picture the little bridge and everything else that was there. So I want to see what time. We're at 7:30 here, and I know everybody wants to try and get back and watch the election results, as do I. And that's going to be a long evening. But I do have a couple of election stories, so presidential stories. One of them I've never told because I didn't want the gentleman who did what he did to get in trouble, but it's been years now, so I don't know if he's still around, but I'm going to give the story anyway. And this, if you don't know who John Tyler was the 10th president of the United States. I don't know the exact years that he served from the presidency, but it was like the early 1800s, somewhere 1820, 1829, somewhere in there. And he became president at the death, I believe, of, again, I'm a history buff, but this goes back a while, and I wasn't prepared for it. I guess I should have. But I think he died at the death of William Henry Harrison, who died. I think he got sick during the inauguration. And when he passed, I'm going to do a couple of sidelines here because I get a little bit of history. But when he passed, I think it was William Henry Harrison, or William Harrison. Can't remember which one. William Henry, I think. And when he died, because he died so soon after he became president, but he did order his presidential plates, because every president gets their own place settings for state dinners and things of that nature. And he had ordered his from France at that time, and then he died suddenly, I think of pneumonia. And when he died, no one thought to cancel the order of all this china from France. And so when this huge order of china came in from France for the White House, it wasn't for anybody else, because John Tyler, when he became president, ordered his own china with his own pattern in it for the Tyler presidency. And so I believe, I'm telling the story. I believe it's all accurate. There may be some things I have to look up from a historical perspective, but I think John Tyler at this point paid personally for this china to take to his personal home in Virginia. And so it was there. So this is all going to be relevant to the story, but I wanted to tell you that little history background for a reason. So Mark and I were on our honeymoon, and we're driving through the Virginia countryside. I believe it was on Route 5 through Virginia. And we came upon John Tyler's house. And Mark and I are people who, when we see the world's biggest ball of yarn, Mark and I will get off the road to go look at it. Or, this is where Annie Oakley is buried. We'll get off whatever it happens to be. If we see one of those road signs, we're off the road to go check it out. We're just those kind of guys. And we got off the road here, and we thought, well, let's go check. We have this thing for presidents' homes. We've been to maybe 11 presidents' homes so far. And we'd never been to John Tyler's home. So we figured we'd stop in and see it. We got there, and apparently my understanding is that his home was open to the public for a long time, that his descendants still live in the home. I believe it is his great grandnephew, perhaps, or great grandson, or somebody that lives still in the house. And his wife at the time, I don't know if they're still there, lived in the home. And we met them as they were leaving the home to go out do some errands. We were there. Mark and I were the only people there. And normally you can't really go in. You kind of need, well, again, I don't know what it is today. I don't know. This is going back years. But there was nobody else there. And we paid, I can't remember, quite a bit of money to go have a private tour of the home. And the gentleman who came out and brought us in, since the homeowners were out, and this is where it gets a little dicey, and why I don't tell the story, or haven't told the story to the day, is he brought us into the home and took us into some private areas of the home where there were some articles, and this is where the plates came in. And so here I am, holding plates that, a president had ordered and the president used in his own personal collection, and his walking stick and some other things in his glasses, and his things that Mark and I got to see and touch, and it made history come alive for us. And it was lovely. So if you're out there, and hopefully if you're no longer employed there, thank you very much. If you are employed there, I promise I will deny the story that you didn't do this. But I thank you because it brought history alive. And being big history buffs as we are, it was a very special occasion for Mark and I to be able to do that. But one of the interesting things about that experience was in the house, in the private residence, there is a stairway. So again, this is one of those old plantation homes. So the front of the house faced the river, and I think it's the Potomac there. But so the front of the house, which come up the driveway today, you're coming up to the back of the house, and the front of the house would face the river, because that was the only way to get to the plantation back in the day, back in the late 1700s, early 1800s. There were no roads there. So this is how they would bring everything in. So you went to we walked through the house, and as we were going through the house, there was the private area. There were the nurseries, where the nurseries were, and they would have there was a back stairway that led up to an area of the house where I believe the children were looked after. And with Mark and I there, this gentleman was telling us that one of the steps in there has a picture of a little girl on it, and the they've painted over it, they've sanded it, they've done everything, but there was a little girl, one of the Tyler children, I believe, died in the house. And once that happened, this this face appeared on the steps, the stairway of this house, and it's there to this day. Assuming that they haven't torn the house, hasn't burned down. I haven't been there in years, but at the time they had done everything that they possibly could, according to the story here, of trying to remove this child's face from the stairs after it appeared there, and it's amazing to see. So he let us go on the stairway where we could see this little face of this little girl that had died there. So kind of an interesting from a ghost story. But I have to say, even as a medium, while I felt interesting things, they only felt the energy in that home where the private family, where the family had their living room. There was so much energy and stuff in that room. That was the room that really resonated for me. I didn't get a sense of anything on the stairwell. Quite frankly, in the parlor area where the president's his personal effects and stuff were, didn't get much stuff there. Where it really got a heavy sense of spirit in that house was in that in the private quarters of the family when they lived there. I would love to go back if they ever watch this. Thank you for sharing some of your home with me and my husband. If you do watch this, I would love to come back to the house at some point to do a cleansing and just to see what I get in the house, and be happy to do that to let you know what I'm seeing and sensing in the home. So anyway, it's a lovely little ghost story of a president who doesn't get much recognition as being one of the we're about 45, potentially 46 after tonight. And it was interesting to be in the home. Now, Mark and I have been to, Wilson's home and Lincoln's and Mary Todd Lincoln, and can't even think of all the presidents, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, all their homes. So, but the John Tyler home was one of those ones that I think is pretty off the beaten path a little bit. But if you get a chance to go see it, go take a tour of the home up in Virginia. The last one I'm going to talk about, because we're running low on time here, and I hope this has been a little entertaining and taking your mind away from the stress of the day of the election. But the last one is actually also presidentially related. And Mark and I, again, we're in Virginia, and I wish I could remember the name of the home. And if I can, I will let everybody know what this is. But there was an inaugural ball for George Washington at this home in Virginia. And again, it was one of those homes that Mark and I stumbled upon while we were on our honeymoon. And we came across this house and didn't know anything about it at all. And it was amazing, quite frankly. It not only did it have the Washington connection with the ball there, but it also had a connection that it was during, I believe it was the Civil War, where there was an encampment because the grounds were so large in Virginia that the Union soldiers got control of this area and used it as an encampment for a while. And this house was used as the headquarters for that encampment. So when Mark and I went there, so we're again getting the history lesson, and there actually was a little film there about the history of the house and stuff. And when we went in, we're walking down, and there's a couple of large cannonballs still wedged in a couple of the off buildings off of the main house. And we stumbled upon this house. We knew nothing about the history, but when we were walking toward the house, I could see a little girl clearly up in the corner of a room. And she appeared in one of the windows. And as we walked around the house, she appeared in another window, just staring. And I could tell at that time that she knew I saw her and she could see me. And we're just staring at one another. And I thought it was very strange because you could tell the dress that she was in, that it was a period dress. So I'm thinking, I've been to many places like Williamsburg where, children are dressed in costume and things to give it a different ambiance. So I'm seeing this little girl, and she followed me she was in one window. She went to another window around a corner. And that's when I brought it to Mark's attention. I said, I'm pointing up there and there's a little girl in this house. And she died of, getting like yellow fever or getting something about this with this child. And Mike and I toured more of the grounds and walked around. We went back into the gift shop afterwards, and I made an inquiry. And apparently, two girls had died in that house, but I got to see the one. I'd love to go back there too. Again, this is something that has to happen with permission. I couldn't walk up, but there was nobody lived in the house. They're again, where the presidential ball was in that home. There was a large, I guess you would call it a parlor or something, where they had had the dance, and they had several dozen, or a few hundred perhaps. I have no idea how many people were at that particular ball. Washington apparently had balls all over the place, inaugural balls everywhere, and this was one of them at a private residence. And so, but there was nobody on the second floor, so there were no young people dressed, and nobody was dressed in period costume at this place. So what I saw was this spirit. I would love to go back there, so I'm going to do some inquiries too, and hopefully maybe with somebody else we could go do and take care of some of these hauntings that I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to go see, but hopefully could go help and solve, and so that these spirits can continue on their spiritual journey. Those are the stories I have for tonight. I hope that you found them entertaining. I hope that you took your mind off the election or the angst that's happening currently across the country. But I do want to say, and I do want to send out healing energy to this country. It's been a contentious few months and years, particularly since the advent of COVID, where this country has been very much divided. And hopefully the people on this network, on Enlightened World Living, can help, and I'm sure are helping to balance out some of the angst and vitriol and anger and stuff that has come with this election, and with COVID and the uncertainties that come along with loss of jobs and things of that nature. So I pray for this country. I hope that all of you will as well. And we're all going to get through it together. And I wish you all a lovely evening. We'll see you again next Tuesday with another show. And have a great evening. Love and peace. Have a great night.